Hey guys, let's be honest, you've probably had nights where you lay in bed replaying the demands of the day, questioning if you're doing enough, being enough, or leaving behind something that matters. I know that loop too. And tonight, I want to guide you out of it. Because there's another way to look at all of this. A softer, lighter way that doesn't ask you to fix anything at all. Instead, it offers permission to rest. So, settle in. You've already arrived where you need to be, and subscribe for more. Imagine lying in the dark, your head on the pillow, your mind pinging from one unfinished task to another. The messages you didn't send, the project you didn't complete, the workout you skipped. Each one whispers, should, as if the entire scoreboard of your life depended on ticking every single box. And it feels endless, like you're running out of time, yet also chained to an invisible list that grows every time you breathe. It doesn't matter how much you did in the day, there's always some remainder, some missing proof that you earned your spot here. And as you stare at the ceiling, the weight presses harder. Is that what keeps you awake? That steady drill of purpose, hammering in your chest. The world has trained us for this. Prove you're useful, prove you're special, prove you're one of the ones worth remembering. From childhood, the rhythm begins grades, trophies, smiling photos to show you're thriving. Later, it's jobs, titles, stacked calendars. Each layer whispers that your purpose is something to earn, that your life is an exam waiting to be graded. And the test never ends. You turn in pages, night after night, never knowing the score, because there isn't one. Only the sound of your own measuring stick, scraping away at your sense of self. The trouble is, equating your worth with tasks is a trap that resets every morning. The moment you get out of bed, the cycle starts fresh. You can run faster, check off more, pile the calendar until it groans, but the wheel keeps spinning. Like a hamster in its cage, legs pumping with frantic energy, yet the world outside stands perfectly still. You feel the exhaustion of forward momentum, but you're anchored in place, going nowhere. And the cruel part? You look around at others and assume they're sprinting further, that you're the one not keeping up. The wheel isn't just endless, it's isolating. The louder it squeaks, the more convinced you are that you're running badly. This wasn't always the deal. In centuries past, your life story was largely spelled out for you before you could say your own name. A villager born into farming knew he'd farm. A child born into the church knew her path long before she had her first doubt. You were told your role, accepted your script, and that's the part you played. It was rigid, yes, and often suffocating, but it also carried predictability. The wider meaning wasn't something you were expected to invent. In a very strange way, it was simpler to sleep at night when the answers were already delivered with your lot. Today, though, the script has been shredded. Now you are both actor and playwright, expected to draft a purpose from scratch, make it spectacular, and perform it flawlessly for a crowd that never applauds. And you know the effect of that. Rest becomes unsafe. To close your eyes feels like wasting potential. To pause at all feels selfish. The thought sneaks in. Why lie still when you haven't finished enough? That tension clings to modern life, thick as smog. It leaks into social feeds, office check-ins, even conversations with friends who boast about being productive. The air is loaded with an unspoken grading curve. Do enough, do more. Make it matter, or risk being invisible. Is it any wonder that exhaustion has grown into its own plague? People describe feeling unusable, like unwound machines. Nights once designed for sleep are now the stage where failures come to parade. The real question is whether this test even exists, the one you're punishing yourself for failing. Because when you stretch out under the blankets, waiting for sleep that won't arrive, you're running after something that was never there in the first place. Who decided you need to draft a grand narrative? Who handed out these invisible ledgers that tally your worth? What if that voice, insisting on more, is not truth but training? The world has taught you to chase meaning like oxygen, yet it provides none of the satisfaction when you inhale it. You just gasp and hurry back to the chase. And here's a small shock. The wheel you're on, the one spun by urgency and should, it has no end point, no final bell. It's not a marathon you someday finish. It's a loop that feeds itself. And the harder you push, the faster it grinds. Which explains why even so-called success never lands as triumph. That long-sought win evaporates almost immediately, replaced by something else you ought to be doing already. Little victories never add up to rest. They collapse into tomorrow's hunger. That is why your eyelids press heavy but refuse to seal. The very pursuit of meaning is the engine of your torment tonight. You might recognize this in the way small mistakes sting like shames. A missed text feels like evidence you're failing as a friend. Losing focus at work feels like a hollow in your identity. Every should becomes proof that your story is collapsing in on itself. And the story constantly raises the stakes. Sleep becomes proof of laziness. Stillness becomes wrongdoing. Your own body resisting the wheel is framed as betrayal, which means rest itself feels undeserved until some higher score is earned. And let's be honest, it never will be, because the system never allowed for a finish line. Think about how strange our modern invention of meaning truly is. You use smartphones and screens not just to fill hours, but to tally evidence of how well you're doing. Algorithms weigh you by how much you share, how much you hustle, how much you shine through the digital noise. Each interaction becomes another decimal point in your trial. You're judged by metrics too faint to see, and the stress hums even in your bones. Past generations lived inside rigid boundaries, true, but they were not tasked with dragging their individuality across every dawn, sculpting a fresh epic. This endless authorship is peculiar to our time, and it's almost designed to keep you restless. So what if you don't accept it? What if you decide tonight that the test is rigged and not even real? Imagine the release that follows. Imagine if your pillow didn't serve as the jury bench, but as an actual cushion again. What kind of rest would you fall into if you dropped the spinning wheel, just for these hours of darkness? The paradox is clear. The way we've defined purpose has created a world where nobody feels purposeful enough. The game keeps you playing but never lets you win, which means the most radical act is not to improve at it, but to see through it, to lay it down, to let it rust in its cage while you slip quietly into sleep. This search for endless significance is not harmless ambition. It's the very reason peace won't stay with you. Every time you chase purpose too hard, you burn away another chance at slumber. Stay in the loop, and you trade away nights for a trophy that never existed. Step out of the loop and suddenly rest flickers back into view. Because the secret is that purpose, as we imagine it, is not some built-in demand. It's a suit we put on every morning. Too tight, too heavy, fraying at the seams, but a suit, not a skin. And suits can be discarded. They can be hung in the closet as you breathe into the softness of your sheets. This is the seed I want to plant tonight. That this weight you carry, the weight of proving, of should, is not law. It's cultural smoke, and it can slip through your fingers. You can choose not to clutch it. You can set it down, not forever if that feels strange, but for tonight. For these hours, the darkness doesn't demand meaning from you. The bed does not measure you. Rest requires no accomplishment. Nothing needs to be proved. Nothing at all. And when that possibility dawns that meaning may not be required at all, you find the door to relief. Because once you question the authority of the test, the game starts to crumble, and what's left is silence. A clean, blank surface. The admission that nothing is required doesn't just rescue your night, it reframes your days. But we don't have to leap ahead. Tonight is enough. The observation is enough. The very chase of purpose is what chased your sleep away. Which invites the next thought: if you don't need to chase anymore, what opens up instead? Don't answer yet. Let it be a question that softens, not sharpens. And now, that's where we'll wander next. Into the strange and comforting idea that the absence of built-in meaning is not a punishment. It might actually be a lullaby. 3. The strange comfort of nothingness. What if, instead of running, the idea of nothing could tuck you in? It sounds almost wrong at first, doesn't it? We're so used to thinking of nothing as a hole in the ground, or a missing piece, or the kind of void you don't want to slip into. But picture it another way. The kind of nothing that is calm, open, without pressure. The kind of nothing that sits beside you with no judgment, no rules, no alarm clock ticking in the dark. What if that nothing was the blanket you didn't realize you were looking for? This is where the idea of nihilism drifts in. Not as a hammer striking you with finality, but as a whisper reminding you that life itself doesn't come stamped with a purpose. It doesn't arrive with instructions, like some complicated gadget that needs setting up. It just is. That's the thought behind nihilism, the belief that life has no fixed built-in meaning, no secret code running in the background telling you what to do. Few ideas make people shift in discomfort faster than that line. Nothing matters. It clatters like a dropped plate. It can sound like loss, like staring into an abyss of pointlessness. And yet, when you sit with it, when you stop sprinting from it, something unexpected happens. It quiets the room. Think of the night sky. At first glance, it looks like pure emptiness. A sweep of vast, high blackness without walls, without anchors. You might even feel that old instinctive shiver the same way travelers once felt when they kept watch, wondering what might live in the dark. But if you keep looking, the darkness shifts. Pinpricks appear, then entire constellations. There is motion, shimmer, and vast depth. What felt threatening becomes a stretch of awe. The blankness holds not fear, but freedom to see. But the trick is that it only shows itself when you stop interrogating it. When you let your eyes rest rather than demand reasons. That is the actual shape of nihilism. Not a declaration that life is hopeless, but simply a recognition. There is no hidden script. The roles aren't handed out from some cosmic office. And that realization has scared people across generations. There's a reason philosophers muttered about it, even whispered about it as a crisis. Because overnight, maps burned up. No longer did you have an unquestioned set of rules that said, "This path is yours." Without that, life feels uncharted. You stand in the middle of a plain without signs. It's not exaggeration to say many found that terrifying. Lost is not a pleasant word. One thinker tried to capture this shift bluntly. He looked around at a culture that had once anchored itself in religion, tradition, and a rigid sense of destiny. And he realized that those anchors were dissolving. The claim, "God is dead," wasn't written like a triumph or a sneer. It was more an observation that the structures holding society's meaning had collapsed. He saw the torch of stability flicker out, and what stretched ahead looked like darkness. What do you do when the framework that told you who you are, what you should do, and why, simply evaporates? For many, that's not just uncomfortable, it's panic. The strange part is that this panic often comes less from the fact itself, and more from our compulsion to keep demanding meaning at every turn. We want coordinates, direction signs, a big glowing answer. But what happens if we stop asking? If we lean into the darkness like a hammock rather than pacing the edge? Imagine not needing the sky to tell you why it exists. Imagine being allowed to just stare at it. The stars don't answer back, yet they are still beautiful, layered, endless, serene. They don't need to, and neither do you. So the question stands. What would life look like if emptiness wasn't a hole, but an open plain? What if the absence of a scripted point didn't leave you flailing, but left you free? Free of exactly the test, the grade, the expectation you've been carrying. It is not easy to see it this way at first. The gut wants to insist. No, there must be a reason. The gut wants to resist the clean quiet of nothing. But once you practice holding that thought, "Nothing was assigned to me," it starts to loosen the tight belt strapped around your mind. Because if meaning is not compulsory, then its absence is not a failure. It is the neutral ground you've always been standing on. This is the seed of what has often been called optimistic nihilism. Rather than treating meaninglessness as a death knell, treat it as an opening, a fresh surface. You woke up today to no cosmic supervisor grading your choices. The universe will not dock your pay because you missed a workout. The galaxies will not collapse because you forgot to send one email. The absence of meaning is not threat, it is permission. Nothing matters, and that is relief, not punishment. Because nothing matters also means nothing is demanded. Picture a painter standing before a white canvas. For someone who thinks the canvas should already come pre-painted, it feels like a void. It feels unfair. But for someone who understands that the lack of image means opportunity, not failure, it feels freeing. There's no instruction to follow, no penalty for not painting a masterpiece. You can place one color, or none. Either is acceptable, either is real. The white canvas doesn't look at you with disapproval. It waits quietly, and only if you wish to lift a brush. The canvas of life, unscripted, undefined, works exactly the same way. We tend to forget this. We forget that the gravity making us sprint in circles comes not from the void, but from our refusal to let it be. If nothing is handed down, then nothing is required. Nothingness doesn't hold a whip over you. It is not a demanding boss. It is absence, silence, still air. This is why resting tonight should not feel like guilt, but like alignment. You are already aligning with the truth that in the absence of any built-in assignment, you can simply exist. You don't need to write a thesis of your day in order to deserve sleep. You don't need to close every task in order to close your eyes. So, then, the abyss you feared turns out to be a couch, a soft one, wide enough for you to spread out, remove the weight, and breathe without urgency. Emptiness doesn't crush you, it cushions you. The sky is not a vacuum threatening to consume. It is the ceiling of your quiet room. The rivers of stars are not directions. They are glimmers you're free to watch, or not. What would it feel like to let your lungs match the pace of that infinity? In, out. No rush. Not one breath anywhere in the universe is keeping score, and that is the point. That is the comfort of nihilism. The first reaction is often terror, but underneath that is calm. Like diving into cold water, the first seconds bite at you, but once your body adjusts, the chill becomes invigorating. The abyss you feared turns into buoyancy. You discover you can float where you thought you'd sink. That is the trick of it. To stop flailing, stop proving, and just let the water hold you. The idea of nothing matters, when embraced, carries that same buoyant surprise. You are not being swallowed, you are being suspended, and that suspension is a gift. It frees you from checking your worth against clocks, against marks, against other people's ladders. No more script to memorize. No plot you're failing to follow. Just space. Space enough for breath. Space enough for peace. And space enough for sleep to arrive without resistance. Because when you realize nothing needs proving, fatigue itself feels lighter. It stops being another failing and starts being a gentle invitation. That's where tonight's comfort begins. We stop running from the abyss. We let it tuck us in. We stop demanding answers from the sky, and instead let the stars glow silently. We put down the performance long enough to see that the stage itself was empty, and the curtain is yours to close whenever you choose. Nothingness is not enemy. It is the backdrop. Not a void to fear, but a canvas to rest upon. And here's where letting go stops sounding dangerous and starts sounding like relief, freedom. Without the script, if the universe isn't grading you, who exactly are you performing for? That's not a trick question, it's a genuine one. Tonight you're lying in bed, muscles tight, brain refusing to nod off, and in the back of your skull, you still feel like you're standing on some stage where an invisible audience is holding up scorecards. 10 points for productivity, 3 points off for missing that email, an average score overall. But if there is no cosmic scoreboard, if meaning is not fixed, then who are you trying so hard to impress? Modern life bends us into this habit of checking ourselves against standards you can't see but always feel. You wake up, and right away the clock ticks. Every hour is a slot, every slot a measurement, every measurement another line in your personal ledger. Did you start early enough? Did you use the time right? You're trained to keep proving, by invisible rulers and stopwatches, that you're doing what should be done. We rarely question why we hand over that much power to numbers and expectations we can't even hold. And by nightfall, it's no wonder you feel like you're lagging behind in a race that never ends. These measures sound practical, right? They seem sensible. Do more, be rated higher, get validated. But the truth is, the scale has no finish. You never outrun it. Even when you hit the goal, another scoots into place like a dangling carrot on a stick. You can't eat it, you can't catch it. Your only option is more running. Disappointment comes baked in. Like ordering a meal that's all aroma and no food, you chase achievement and find your hands still empty afterward. And what kind of rest is possible when your head won't stop replaying an unwinnable game? Not much. Here's a bit of history for context. Picture life before the rise of industry, before whistles marked shifts and bosses drilled schedules into flesh. Back then, the rhythm of work matched the rhythm of daylight. You rose with the sun, worked with the season, and slowed when the light fell away. Time itself bent around nature. Work and rest braided together with rain, crops, and weather. But once the factories and their tall chimneys came into view, the rhythm snapped. Clocks started dictating worth. A whistle marked when you belonged inside walls. Your wrist or someone else's was now the ruler of whether you were late, lazy, or worth keeping. The shift was radical. Time was no longer the sky above your head, it was something carved into metal gears, used to measure obedience and effort. The deeper truth? That's when being judged became normalized on a larger scale. Every hour was counted, every shift timed. You weren't simply working, you were performing, because each minute was graded by how many widgets, how much output, how efficient you were. That habit never left us. Your life today doesn't echo in a mill's time clock, perhaps, but the sense of being observed, ranked, weighed, that stayed. Only now, instead of timetables, it's emails, metrics, status updates, check-ins, self-comparisons. The stage lights moved from the factory to your skull, and they never switch off. So ask yourself again, if no cosmic figure is judging, who's in the audience? The strange answer is often no one. A ghost crowd, conjured by centuries of conditioning. It's as if you keep bowing and reciting your lines in a theatre that has no one in the seats. Imagine standing on that stage, sweating, repeating lines night after night. Then imagine flicking on the house lights and realizing every row is empty. Dust on the chairs. Nobody has been watching. The performance was self-imposed, and once you see that, the obvious question arises, do you still have to do the play? The moment you drop the demand of audience, life begins to look different. Failure, for instance, softens, because without an authority to report to, failure is nothing more than one more choice you experimented with. There's no cosmic clipboard writing in red ink next to your name. The edge you once felt around disappointment dulls. You realize the sting wasn't in the act itself, it was in the imagined grade. The shame of not matching standards. Remove the grader, and it all shrinks into something human, brief, forgivable. Here's where it turns quietly empowering. You are free, right now. You don't have to wait to earn it. You don't need extra points, medals, certificates, congratulatory emails. That freedom doesn't depend on anyone else noticing. It depends only on realizing the rules were never binding in the first place. The lock on that door was painted on. That's why you haven't felt free, you were still pretending the rules were carved in stone. In reality, they were chalk lines on the floor. All you have to do is step across. And stepping across doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean disregard or running wild. It means choosing. Choosing when to care, when to work, when to sleep, all without a foreman in your head. Because there is no absolute obligation to measure up to impossible marks. No script you must follow down to the letter. That idea, strangely, is scarier than submission for many. If there's no role, no script, what if you waste it? But the flip side is gentleness. Without orders, you can act not from compulsion, but from impulse, from small sparks of will, not from enormous iron demands. Think on this. Freedom isn't the storm you've been warned about. It's the soft option that was always there. To live a life not dictated by a scorecard means you can proceed lighter. To fail without clause, to rest without guilt. If the only binding rope was the illusion of judgment, then cutting it doesn't cause a collapse. It causes calm. You step off stage. You finally stop shouting lines into the dark. You lean against the backstage wall, quiet, and notice you can breathe again. That is real freedom. Once you catch hold of that thought, that there is no required role at all, it ripples through your day in ways you don't expect. Suddenly, disappointments are not global verdicts. They are tiny, local slips. Achievements lose their frantic shine, but they gain honesty. They belong to you, not to a scoreboard. The relief that comes is slow at first, then startling. You are free not in principle, but in practice. And it has been true all along. Your life, in that light, becomes a creation only if and when you choose it. You write when you want to write. You sleep when you want to sleep. You care for someone not because it raises your evaluation, but because you wish to care. Think of how noticeably gentler that shift feels. You stop dragging a heavy costume around. You stop panting through endless lines of dialogue. The props and curtains can gather dust while you return to your seat, no longer the overworked actor but the quiet audience, watching your own life in peace. And notice how closely this connects to rest tonight. Without feeling like each moment must be maximized, you grant yourself permission to stop, to close the eyes, to let the nerves release, to breathe without tallying productivity per inhale. The freedom is not just philosophical, it's physical. Shoulder muscles uncoil, jaw stops clenching, thoughts stop scoring themselves. Rest ceases to be one more task on a crowded calendar and becomes its own whole act. The industrial age gave us clocks and whistles, But it also gave us a habit of constant performance. You inherited that habit whether you wanted to or not. But tonight, you can place it aside. The audience is imaginary. The grades don't exist. The stage lights are out. You are no longer required to perform. And if anything, the freedom that results feels not like absence but like a return. A return to yourself, to silence, to sleep. So notice that space opening in front of you. The script no longer binds your steps. The stage no longer holds you hostage. With that freedom, rest begins to feel less like a stolen indulgence and more like its own chosen act. No longer pressure, no longer punishment, just room, soft and waiting. And in the next breath, we'll explore what that room makes possible. The way freedom doesn't simply lift weight, but clears a place for stillness to arrive, without demand or expectation. 5. The heavy burden of self-made purpose. Humans crave purpose like air, but what happens when you try to build it from scratch every single day? That's the puzzle we sit with tonight. Purpose feels like oxygen. And yet in the modern world, it's oxygen we keep synthetic, manufactured in our heads, bottled up in fragile containers that seem to run out before the end of the day. What's stranger is how relentless the demand has become. Waking up feels like clocking into a factory where the chief product is meaning. And each day, you're expected to churn out new batches, regardless of whether you actually feel like existing inside them. One strand of thought describes this bluntly. It insists that we live without a pre-written manual, no fixed destiny, no grand directive stamped at the start, which means you are as free as you will ever be. Every choice, every action, every path you select is yours. It's a wide-open valley. And, on a good day, that's thrilling. On a bad day, it's unbearable. Because standing there means you don't get to blame anyone else if the result is a mess. You don't have the plan as cover. You don't have godly notes or cosmic GPS guiding you to the right exit. You build your route step by step. And every step feels like a binding contract you must carry forever. That was the trick inside this notion. Freedom wasn't airy and weightless. It dragged like a packed suitcase up a flight of stairs. You had to author not only your story, but the values your story was measured by too. That sounds like empowerment on paper. In lived hours, it often feels like a heavy crown nobody asked for. And if you slip, the blame drips right back onto you. That's the price of all this supposed autonomy. You hold the pen, yes, but you also shoulder every single misprint. During what's broadly called the Enlightenment, thinkers hammered on the importance of autonomy. The rally cry was liberation from outside control. Don't just follow the church, the ruler, the tradition. Forge your own path. A noble call, sure. But when entire societies moved from inherited meaning to personal responsibility, something else surfaced. Loneliness of choice. The old roads were narrow, rigid, and sometimes cruel. The new roads were infinite, sprawling, and silent. Freedom came paired with solitude. The torch burned bright, but it also dropped shadows thick enough to sink in. Here's a picture worth holding. Imagine standing at a crossroads in an endless desert, except the desert is crisscrossed with thousands of roads stretching out to the horizon in every direction. None of them bear names, none carry signs, no one hands you a map, and behind you, the old path is gone, swallowed by the sand. You stand there in shoes that weren't made for this, throat dry, eyes trying to pick out just one line that looks less confusing than the others. This is the weight of radical freedom. Plenty of options, no clear guide. If you pick one, it's yours alone. If it turns ugly, yours too. Nothing shares the load. In societies past, your role was stitched into the world before you breathed your first cry. Born into farming, you farmed. Born into priesthood, you obeyed. Born under the anvil, you hammered metal. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't fair, but it was something like secure. You didn't wake with 20 roads waiting. You woke with one. Modern life, on the other hand, calls that prison, but it also hands you the next prison, the paralysis of endless choice. No guide, no tranquil default, only crossroads that leave you awake at night. Do you feel that now? The shaking weight of having to author your existence moment by moment? People imagine it's dramatic choices, only what career, who to marry, whether to have kids. But the weight trickles into tiny choices. 2. What journal to buy to make you legit. What morning routine marks you as serious? Whether to use the evening to rest or to invest in your brand. All small, all loaded, every one forced through the same lens. Will this add to my purpose? Will this prove I'm doing enough? The loop repeats until even brushing your teeth or walking to the store rings with a phantom sense of evaluation. Your identity no longer rests in what you are, but in what you manage to do, as if worth itself only exists as an output. Jobs loom larger than lives, careers stand in for souls, lists and trackers and productivity hacks become idols you hope will bless you with enough significance to sleep at night. And worse failures break louder than they should. A slip at work, a moment of sickness, a lazy afternoon they don't read as momentary. They scream as collapses of your supposed path. That's the gamble modern identity made. Tie worth to purpose, tie purpose to output, then rank identity by what's ticked and unticked at the week's end. The strange paradox here is that freedom, the supposed liberation, becomes its own trap. You have more doors, more options, more ways to build meaning, and yet with each added door, dread grows thicker. Which one is right? What if you waste time? What if you look back regretting? Choice was meant to heal, but it festers. It's the same reason staring at a supermarket shelf with 100 brands of pasta sauce leaves you annoyed, not thrilled. Multiplicity is delight? Sometimes. Multiplicity without compass? Torture. This is choice overload. Each extra possibility rubs against your nerves, convincing you that a wrong decision could ruin it all. No path screams best. Every path gnaws at you with potential regret. The anxiety blooms not because options exist, but because we've attached endless consequence to each of them. As if walking left instead of right damns you to a shallow life. That belief robs peace from ordinary hours. It's not that choices are truly catastrophic, it's that we've been taught to sharpen every one like it is. Add to this the pressure cooker of modern comparison. Social feeds stream highlight reels from peers who already picked routes that look tidy, successful, impressive. You scroll and absorb, until your internal judge declares you're too slow, too lazy, half-baked. And while you chase, remember the feed only shows choicest fragments, trimmed down to the perfect story, yet your brain treats it as full gospel, which deepens the sense that you, in your infinite roads, took the wrong detour, hence the anxiety climbs. More choice didn't free you. It caged you in neon glass, under constant appraisal. So yes, this burden is real. To admit it feels risky, you don't want to seem weak. But the truth is, nothing is weak here. It is exhausting to author your life every hour. It is daunting to pick among thousands of unlabeled roads. It is suffocating to equate identity with checkboxes that sprint ahead faster than you can tick them. None of this is lazy. It's structural. Just as generations before carried burdens of lack of freedom, ours is a burden of too much of freedom without anchor, choice without clear sign. And here's the quiet turn. Recognition is half the release. You cannot untangle anxiety if you pretend it isn't there. You can't lighten the suitcase if you don't admit you're dragging it up 3 flights. But once you allow that, this constant production of purpose is absurd. Once you frame it as a game engineered to tire you out, something clicks. You stop assuming you're failing. Instead, you see the weight for what it is, a collective setup that no single person can carry well. Clarity is relief. The second half of release comes with the realization you don't need to keep playing. In the same way we spoke about stepping off stage, here too, you can choose to set the burden down. Tonight, you can leave the roads unchosen. You can suspend the pretense that every decision etches eternity into stone. Instead, you can breathe into the recognition that uncertainty is normal, that rest is not a wrong choice, that opting out of significance for a few hours is not betrayal, but survival. Nobody demands you resolve your entire existence before letting the body sink into your sheets. Nobody rational, anyway. The voice clanging in your head, the one demanding plans, choices, justification, that's the training talking. But you can voice back a refusal. Tonight, you drop the unwinnable game. You stop trying to survey infinite roads under dim stars. You admit that choosing constantly is its own brand of fatigue, and you don't need to trudgingly continue. Not every road needs walking. Some can wait until morning, and as you rest in that recognition, the body itself starts to soften. Because the roads will not vanish if you close your eyes. The burden will not crash the world if you stop carrying it for a few hours. What collapses instead is tension. The rope wound through your muscles, the sharpness behind your eyes, the buzzing of endless appraisal. Let it sink into stillness. Let the choices rest unmade. Allow yourself the radical act of inaction. In a way, that is freedom's final twist. Not endless roads, but permission to stop walking. So from theory, freedom, choices, purpose, we bring it closer to practice. If the heavy burden of self-made purpose has kept you locked in your head, tonight is your chance to set it down. For now, for these quiet minutes, lay flat on that imaginary crossroad, look up at the stars, and allow yourself not to decide. This is not surrender, it's peace. Next, we'll explore how to magnify that peace, easing the burden, practically shaping an approach where even the act of letting go becomes a steady step toward rest. 6. Why chasing meaning burns us out. Ever noticed how achievement feels good for about 5 minutes, then shrinks right through your fingers like water slipping through a crack? You work hard, chase that little hit of recognition, reach the top of some small hill, and then poof, it's gone. The high dissolves before you've even had a chance to enjoy it. Suddenly, you need the next one to feel stable again, which means you're already back on the treadmill just hours after stepping off. That's the strange trick of modern life. Every milestone we chase dissolves as soon as we land on it. The hunger grows even as we feed it. This is how burnout sneaks in. Burnout is rarely about sheer workload alone. It's about the endless expectation that everything you do must have significance. You can work long hours and still manage fine when the work has boundaries, when afterward you let your body and brain settle. But when every meal, every choice, every click must be part of some master narrative about success, then even washing your dishes feels like a test. Step back and look at your own day. How many times did you stress about whether your time was well spent? How often did you treat ordinary moments like investments in your reputation? That calculation, that constant adding up, is exhausting long before the actual labor is. Consider the way pressure attaches to even the tiniest parts of your day. You don't just drink your morning coffee. You think about whether you've chosen the right brand, whether it aligns with your identity, if it makes you look cultured or careless. You post a picture and worry whether the caption is clever enough to matter. Even brushing your teeth can feel like it must contribute to your routine, your brand, your long list of optimized choices. Everything tiny becomes linked to some big invisible story you're supposed to be writing. But who's really reading that story? Who's grading those moments? Nobody. And yet your mind spins them into judgment anyway. Burnout feels less like a sudden collapse, and more like being asked to hold the ocean still with a plastic bucket. Every day you bend down, scoop water, arrange it neatly, and try to control the waves. Within seconds, the ocean laughs and erases your effort. Yet you try again, and again, until your arms ache, your back groans, and you begin to hate the ocean itself. Though the problem isn't the sea, it's the absurd demand you've placed on yourself, to freeze water, to shape a tide. That's what chasing significance in every act really is. A kind of impossible labor that wears you down more than any actual workload ever will. And if you listen around you, you'll notice more and more people whisper the same story. Younger generations especially show a rising exhaustion that doesn't come only from jobs or money struggles. It comes from the burden of proving their worth through constant achievement. You can sense it in how many describe themselves as tired all the time, how often stress and depression echo through conversations, how often the refrain comes back, "I should be doing more." The body grows weaker when the mind demands endless purpose. It's like trying to hold your breath while sprinting eventually. Something cracks under the strain. Compare this to earlier societies. In those worlds, meaning often arrived pre-assigned. Faith, tradition, inherited duty, it all came packaged as your role. You still carried burdens, but they weren't the burden of inventing meaning each sunrise. A farmer worked not because it built an identity, but because harvest was necessary. A blacksmith hammered metal because the village needed metal. A daughter raised younger siblings not because it enhanced her resume, but because someone had to. Was it rigid? Yes. Was it confining? Absolutely. But the task wasn't laced with constant questioning about cosmic purpose. The labor was labor, not identity, which meant that while fatigue was real, this special brand of burnout born from over-meaning didn't nest itself so deeply in the chest. Burnout today, then, is not just overwork. It's over-meaning. It's the constant attempt to prove that every single action ties into a bigger plan. Each choice becomes a dramatic exam. Every hour must add to a narrative arc. That's what drags you down. Not the number of hours awake, but the weight strapped onto each minute. You can work less and still be crushed. Because the crushing force isn't physical, it's philosophical. It's the heavy assumption that life needs to constantly justify itself. And once you see that, an insight grows. The collapse you fear when you can't keep up isn't laziness, and it isn't weakness. It's the natural result of being asked to manufacture significance every time you turn on the light. Imagine a computer forced to run 3 heavy programs at once, while also playing music and scrolling through feeds. Eventually, the fan screams, the battery drains, the system crashes. You don't blame the computer's morality, you blame the demand. Humans aren't different. You weren't built to spin every gesture into eternal narrative. You were built to live. This is where compassion enters. Because burnout framed as a personal flaw just piles guilt onto exhaustion. You fall behind, you berate yourself, you fall further. But burnout, reframed as overmeaning, changes the tone. It shifts blame off the person and onto the system of demand. It allows you to say, the problem isn't me. The problem is that I'm holding a bucket against a tide. That recognition softens the mind. It invites rest where before there was only accusation. Instead of whipping yourself harder for falling behind, you can simply say, of course I'm tired. This setup was unwinnable from the start, and in that recognition, doors crack open. You don't need to keep demanding more from yourself tonight. You don't have to measure whether this hour of lying still contributes to some larger purpose. It doesn't need to. Letting your body sink into sheets does not need a justification. It just is. That self-compassion is not laziness. It's clarity. It's realizing that rest is as real as work, as necessary as output, and far less destructive than the endless chase for significance. Every generation creates its own traps. Some built rigid walls of duty that kept people from breathing. Ours built mirrored walls of freedom that reflect back every choice until you collapse from the weight of options. Neither system is perfect. But understanding our trap matters. Ours is not a lack of achievement. Ours is the demand that each moment be packed with achievement. That's the battery drain. That's the reason the room feels heavy as you try to sleep. So tonight, when your brain nags at you to summarize the day, to prove it mattered, to calculate its weight, pause. Recognize that this habit, the habit of over-meaning, is the true culprit. Your fatigue is not a failure. It's evidence you've been strong enough to carry an impossible weight this long. You don't need to carry it past this moment. You can place it down, slow the breath, and choose silence instead. And that sets the stage for something bigger. Once you see that burnout is born from over-meaning, you can experiment with its opposite. What would it look like to stop stitching meaning into every gesture? To let blank moments stay blank? To allow freedom to breathe without explanation? That quiet experiment carries the potential to soothe not just this night, but many that come after. Now, with that thought stirring quietly inside you, we can move toward a solution. A way of seeing the absence of meaning not as loss, but as relief. A direction that points not to more demands, but to gentler space. And that direction is optimistic nihilism. The permission that comes when you release the chase entirely, not out of defeat, but out of calm acceptance. Because if everything doesn't need to matter, then tonight, you can finally rest. And that's where we're headed. Into the possibility of letting go, not from despair, but from a softer posture. Into the strange release that follows when you say, nothing needs to matter right now. Into a kind of freedom you don't have to earn or build, only notice. So let's step there slowly, letting the thought loosen your grip, inviting your breath to slow, and preparing you to meet the comfort already waiting in meaning's absence. Word count, 1096. 7. When nothing matters, you can finally breathe. What if the truth that nothing matters wasn't threatening, but healing? You've heard it before, maybe with a shiver. Someone says, nothing matters, and your mind paints a bleak, empty room, voices echoing about pointlessness. It sounds severe at first glance. But what if, instead of cruelty, it came as a doorway? What if that barren thought was less a wall and more like a deep breath, telling you, hey, you're off the hook. Right now, in this moment, there is no homework from the universe, No unseen ledger to fill out. Nothing matters, and that means you don't have to keep proving yourself long after midnight. This is where a softer approach kicks in, something often called optimistic nihilism. The name sounds heavy, but the feeling is light. It simply reframes the idea of life's lack of built-in meaning as a chance, not a curse, not a loss. When nothing is prescribed, nothing is required. When nothing is demanded, all that's left is what you actually want to do, or not do. Instead of dragging around cosmic expectations, you're given a blank page. And blank pages may intimidate, but they're also clean, simple, open. Of course, most people tense up at the phrase, "nothing matters." It's understandable. We've been conditioned to chase significance, to treat every hour as part of some big arc, to see setbacks as grand failures. So hearing that none of it matters feels like whiplash. It sounds like your narrative just got erased. But here's the twist. The erasure is the liberation. Imagine if you had a life assignment, detailed down to every action, under surveillance at all times. You'd beg for release. Meaninglessness is exactly that release. It hands you your breath back. Think of it like this. What if gravity was flicked off for a minute? At first, your stomach flips. You're used to the ground beneath you. Then, as you adjust, the thrill replaces panic. You're floating. No weight pressing down, no demand to plant your feet exactly right. Just suspension, free movement. That's what the absence of meaning feels like when you stop struggling. No crushing responsibility holding you in place. Just space, just air, just existence without penalty. Look upward again at the night sky. Astronomers remind us of its scale, this enormous field littered with radiant dust. None of it cares what you did today, or yesterday, or what you'll do tomorrow. The stars don't attach importance to your job performance or whether your texts were witty enough. Their light spills across eons, indifferent. But indifference isn't cruelty. It's neutrality, a stage set where beauty exists without needing justification. The stars shine, and they don't require purpose to sparkle. They simply are. The same can be true for you. Now hold a softer image. Somewhere in the branches of a tree, in the quiet, a small bird bends down to feed her chicks. She doesn't stop to wonder if this act contributes to legacy or larger story. She doesn't calculate whether to keep pace with the other bird families in the area. She just does. She lives, she provides, she rests. Life in its simple rhythm, without staged significance. Watching such things has always been medicine. For humans, we see survival, care, presence, without any trace of self-judgment. And in watching, we remember, present existence is enough. Optimistic nihilism points right to that ease. The freedom that comes when you stop building your life into a thesis that passes or fails. You're allowed to be here like the bird, like the stars, like the blade of grass surrendering to breeze. Not to prove, not to pass, but just to exist. In a universe that doesn't demand a file of achievements, existence itself is miraculous. Odds stacked across time and physics brought you here. That's already extraordinary. Why keep running as if you still need to validate your being? Here's the mini payoff. When nothing matters, urgency dissolves. Suddenly the stopwatch loses its tick. The heart unclenches. Because without pressure to carve meaning every minute, you breathe easier. A regular breath, not the short, shallow one of dread. Notice it right now, the way that thought nudges your lungs open, the way it lets the shoulders slope lower against fabric. That's the shift. Not theory, not lofty words, but your body loosening because it senses nothing is demanded of it. This is the paradox. Nothing matters sounds like a sentence, but it's really a pardon. No watchtower scanning you for mistakes, no golden narrative you're botching, just you being, and that is sufficient. That's how urgency drains out. When you realize nothing is at stake, you stop sprinting. You notice air in your chest, blankets against the skin, weight easing from toes upward. No pace needed, no timeline imposed. That's what healing feels like. Of course, once you accept that, even mistakes shrink. Past errors no longer hang as verdicts. If life has no inherent grade, then what could failure be except one more note in a short song? You can forgive yourself, not in some abstract way, but plainly, because in the larger scheme, there is nothing to ruin. Think about how heavy guilt feels after small errors. Then apply this logic. If the larger script doesn't exist, you didn't ruin anything. Those were ripples in a pond, gone as waves of other ripples roll through. Guilt, then, becomes a ghost you can stop chasing. And this posture, standing in the recognition that life is blank but still sweet, helps you see the miracle stitched into small, fleeting things. A favorite meal tonight. The way your cat rolled on the carpet earlier. A laugh you didn't expect that caught your lungs off guard. These moments don't add up. They're not investments in larger arcs. They just are. And they're precious exactly because they pass. No cosmic judge needs to preserve them for eternity, for them to ring true in your chest. Think about hitting pause in a forest at dusk. The trees sway quietly, branches shifting, wind threading through. You're not recording it. You're not explaining it. You don't ask what it means. And yet, it stirs something. That's optimism in nihilism. Not that it gives you a new ultimate answer, but that it frees you from the burden of asking. Once you stop demanding answers, beauty speaks for itself. Optimistic nihilism doesn't refuse value. It allows you to stop pretending that value needs to be eternal to be worthwhile. The cut of sunlight across your wall in the morning doesn't last. That doesn't lessen it. The laughter shared over food ends when the dishes are put away. That doesn't break it. Things are good and bright precisely because they vanish. Knowing they vanish invites gratitude, not despair. If it won't last forever, then every second is unrepeatable. And by that logic, every second matters precisely in its matterlessness. So here we find the resolution. Nothing to prove, nothing to rush. The tighter you cling to significance, the more it slips. The moment you release the grasp, time feels generous again. You don't need a grand stage to play on. You don't need to keep tally. You are here, still breathing, and nothing arrives demanding explanation. Notice the quiet that thought plants in your muscles. Notice the heaviness it allows into your eyelids. This is what optimistic nihilism looks like. Lived not an angry shout against life, but a calm acceptance of its small, miraculous acts. And so, with this relief resting in you, we can shift softly into the next frame, away from theory, away from explanation, into imagery that holds you suspended, floating, cradled by night, unharmed in the void. Because if nothing needs to matter, then you are free to rest fully, not bound, not judged, not rushed, just weightless, carried, closing the eyes as if the entire universe had gently dimmed its lights for you alone. So let's drift there. Let the breath elongate. Let the backdrop of space cradle you without demand. The next images waiting will help you deepen into that weightless rest. Not threat, not loss, but your first true pause. Word count, 1096. 8. Floating in the void as rest. Imagine yourself not falling, not sinking, just drifting without weight. You're not tumbling like a stone through space. And you're not anchored like something heavy tied to the bottom of a river. No, you're simply suspended, as if the air, the water, the entire wide fabric of the universe has turned soft and pillowy and agreed to carry you. There's no rush downward, no strain upward, just the sensation of floating still, effortless, supported. Picture it more clearly. You're lying on a vast, quiet sea at night. The water beneath you is dark, glassy, and calm. It doesn't push or pull, it just holds. Each wave that reaches you is gentle, rolling under your body so lightly that you barely feel the rise. The sky stretches so wide that you can't see its edges. Stars scatter above you, unbothered by your presence. And somewhere in that silence, you notice that you're not trying anymore. You're not keeping afloat by effort. The water itself has taken that burden away. At first, this scene almost feels lonely. There's no shore in sight, no lighthouse beam carving through the dark, no other boat floating nearby with signals to exchange. Only you, the water, and the sky. For a moment, emptiness brushes against the chest. That familiar twinge, the shouldn't I be somewhere, doing something, proving something? But stay a little longer, keep drifting in place. The loneliness distorts into something else. You hear the quiet, you feel the stillness, and it doesn't bite. Instead, it soothes. Turns out, the void isn't barren. It's a refuge, wide enough to absorb all the worry without echo. Look again at the scene. Above you, stars, tiny pinpricks glinting across black silk. They don't organize themselves for you. They don't spell words, or answer questions, or provide instruction. They twinkle without reason, and that's part of the astonishment. Below you, water that stretches endlessly, a deep, flawless plain. No one asks anything of you here. No work list floats on the horizon. No voice calls new demands. You are allowed to rest, without performance, without grades, without schedule. The thought might come. People used to look at these very skies differently. For sailors, survival often hung on such points of light. Stars were maps, guides, the difference between landfall and being lost forever. They studied them with sharp attention, tracing lines between them to mark courses. In that world, the night sky was not optional. It was instruction in glowing form. But you're not sailing anywhere tonight. You're not charting a path or chasing a landmark. You're allowed to simply see the stars for what they are. For once, no teaching, no calculating, no navigation, just watching. What a strange luxury, to look at these fires and not demand direction. Now return to the water. Watch how each ripple, when it passes, disappears utterly. A ring spreads outward, then melts into smoothness, leaving no permanent trace. If nothing matters in the way we imagine, then mistakes behave just like that. Spreading in brief circles, then swallowed into the larger sea. All the errors that gnaw at you before sleep, forgotten messages, half-done plans, words you wish had gone differently, their ripples no one measures. They dissipate, unnoticed, undone, like a small sigh vanished into wind. How heavy can failure really be, when even the ocean itself refuses to hold marks? And as you sit with it, another question surfaces, not sharp, but soft. What does this freedom feel like inside your body? Where in your shoulders does a small release appear? How do your ribs widen as you realize nothing is holding you accountable out here? Feel your spine against the air, your head not tugging upward or downward, your whole frame resting as if on invisible arms. This is relaxation, not something you fight to gain, but something that comes from realizing there's no fight to begin with. The void, the emptiness you feared, shapeshifts now. It's not a gaping hole swallowing you whole. It's a cushion spreading beneath you, firm enough to support, soft enough to let you sink just slightly. Imagine the entire universe folding around you like a cradle. No sound except the faint roll of water. No sight except the scatter of stars that don't need your interpretation. This is not the nothingness of loss. It is the nothingness of rest. It is the mattress of infinity itself, pulling your body into ease. Notice how that changes the conversation in your head. You began with the worry that a void must take from you, that without purpose you would feel erased. Yet here, the exact opposite breathes against you. Without purpose, what erases isn't you, but the strain, the clench of proving, the push of running, the friction of failing. All of those dissolve. What remains is you lighter, easier, cradled. This is what it means for nothing to matter. Not destruction, but support. Not judgment, but permission. Slow down even further. Hear the ripple as it slides past your ear. Watching the stars, you notice their indifference, and instead of irritation, you feel awe. This is the oldest trick of existence, that when you stop interrogating life for what it means, it stops resisting you. It just shows what was there all along. A flood of space, dark but soft, endless but not threatening. From your floating position, you're both nowhere and everywhere, not required to act, not demanded to justify, just here. The void is not trying to trick you. It has no hidden clause demanding answers. You're the one who added those weights before. Take them off now. Imagine setting them down in the water and watching them sink until they vanish. Notice your body lighten a little as each one leaves another pressure released, another expectation drowned. The sea holds enough for all of them. You don't need to carry them on top. Even the thought, "I must sleep," can be tossed overboard. Let that phrase sink too. Rest does not need to be forced. It arrives naturally when you stop performing for it. Lying adrift under stars, your breath tallies itself quietly. In, out. It doesn't ask whether this moment will be productive tomorrow. It doesn't need to. This moment is valid solely because it exists, and you exist inside it. Now stay here. Water beneath, stars above, body in between. The cradle doesn't ask permission to hold you. It simply does. And you don't have to maintain anything to be worthy of it. Drifting in the void reveals the secret. Emptiness isn't deficiency. Emptiness is room. Room where you can breathe, expand, soften. Here, nothing presses down. Here, Nothing hunts your attention. Here, nothing punishes. And that is why it's safe. Your lungs slow of their own accord because they realize no clock ticks against them now. Your muscles slacken for the same reason. You have permission to surrender every last ounce of tension. Nothing else in the universe waits for explanation. The ocean beneath won't scold. The stars above won't demand applause. The cradle is wide enough to catch everything you set loose. And now, the next turn is ready. You've been floating, surrounded by night and water, body carried by nothing but calm. From this still, open place, we'll walk further not into performance or pressure, but deeper into images that soothe. We'll step onto paths that require nothing, forests that hold without asking, skies that open without answers. The drift prepares you for it, making you weightless enough to enter without strain. So let go. Let the void keep carrying you until the water and the stars fade into a different quiet. Drift from infinite sea to whispering trees, from blackwater reflections to branches scratching gently at the moon. The cradle transforms into ground now, and you will stand again, but only inside the dreamlike stillness of a forest at night, wandering aimlessly, freely, safely. That's where we'll move next. Word count: 1096. 9. The gentle forest of forgetting. Step into a forest at night. No task, no clock, only moonlight between branches. The path under your feet is soft, the kind that bends slightly with each step. Leaves press down into soil and whisper back with that hushed crunch you only hear at night. The air is cool, still damp against your skin, carrying the scent of moss and bark. You are here, and though your mind is used to grasping at lists, maps, and deadlines, the forest does not care what you left on your desk or whether you cleaned the kitchen. It places nothing in your hands. You walk a little deeper, slowly, as though the world around you has slowed its gears to match your pace. The moonlight slips down through tall shapes, painting silver ribbons on dark earth. You notice the odd rhythm of your body adjusting to stillness. It keeps expecting a reason to hurry. It keeps checking for signs of obligation. But the forest offers nothing back. It holds silence in place of orders. It waits without bells or reminders. And that confuses the restless voice in your head, the one trained to align each movement with a purpose. Forests were not always this neutral space. Once, they struck fear the moment someone drifted off the beaten road. They were wild margins, full of predators, places where the unknown lived. Stories whispered by firelight, warning of dark shapes between trees. That suspicion clung for centuries. The forest as wilderness, as danger, as test. Even mythology painted these spaces as thresholds to peril or transformation. To step off into the woods meant a trial, a risk of being swallowed. But tonight, you are not standing inside folklore. You are not the hero who must confront beasts. Tonight, the forest has shifted roles. It has traded sharp teeth for gentle silence, and you have permission simply to wander. The ground answers each step you give it with crunch and hush. Crunch and hush. Small nocturnal sounds drift in and out, an owl calling low, a rustle in undergrowth, the faint sigh of wind moving higher branches. No clock ticks, no destination signs point the way. You walk, and each step leads not toward an objective but toward calm. How strange that the mind panics when goals fall away. It flinches, expecting a reprimand for wandering. Yet here no reprimand arrives. The mind waits for orders, but the forest offers only an invitation. Keep moving or stop. Both count equally. Look above, where branches lace together. They frame pieces of cloudy sky, drifting shapes passing in unstable rhythm. You catch one edge of white vapor slipping across the moon. It slides over the light like a veil, and then drifts away again. Clouds whisper their own script unwritten, unplanned, dissolving constantly. They don't hold to sharp aims, yet they are not failures. They move, then vanish. They reform from air you cannot see. Perhaps that is what your thoughts should look like too. Cloud-like, changing, floating across branches, slipping from sight without your interference. The practice of walking through woods without aim has a name in some cultures: forest bathing. The idea is simple. Step into trees and let the senses be saturated. Stand still until bark texture, soil scent, and the ripple of leaves strip away the noise of inside life. You walk slower, but it is more than walking. You listen more acutely. Let the layers of sound stack in your ears until they mute the inner chatter. Even the chemicals trees release, almost invisibly, latch onto your lungs and adjust your body in quiet ways, slowing beats of the heart, trimming stress like excess thread. In a world loud with demand, stepping into a forest is the machine's opposite. A place designed by no one, demanding nothing. So here you are in that imagined wood. You stop expecting yourself to aim. You slow further, footsteps barely lifting from earth. What happens next is subtle. Peace coalesces not because you force it, but because pressure is absent. With no goal to chase, anxiety has no foothold. Without the whip of deadlines lashed against your back, stillness takes shape in your chest. You do not wrestle for calm, it is simply there, waiting once the noise is cut away. You have traded one kind of darkness, the sleepless, restless kind, for another, softer version held inside silver light and owl calls. Remember this. You cannot fail this walk. That statement carries weight. Everywhere else, failure lurks in corners, projects not finished, conversations poorly handled, responsibilities hanging. Here, though, the forest refuses to grade. If you walk 10 steps and sit, it counts. If you circle trees with no arc, it counts. Do as much or as little as you wish it counts. There is no tally, no scoreboard glowing in branches. This is perhaps the first space where your wandering is always enough. Failure has no soil to grow in under these trees. The crunch underfoot, the night calls, the gentle damp air, they are metaphors playing through your nervous system. Each sound is another layer of permission to release. The forest itself becomes a mirror for the mind you wish to have. Unstructured, alive, not rushing toward climax, content to exist. These trees do not worry about proving their purpose. They lean, they grow, they shelter moss, they break down into soil. They contain cycles older than your worry, yet carry no reputation to defend. The metaphor is plain. Let your own mind hold that same looseness. You imagine the tall trunks around you holding silent vigil, their roots pressed deep beneath the surface, their branches high above, knitted together like unseen hands. You feel them cover you, not like guards against unknown beasts, but like allies granting you safe space to wander. And you realize solving meaning is not required. That heavy coat can fall loose from your shoulders. Wandering itself is enough. Breathing is enough. Stopping to hear the scratch of a branch in wind is enough. This is not something to be earned. It is biologically present, waiting as soon as you step into leaves. What is the forest but a container? A spacious cathedral without walls that cages no one but also holds comfort. Inside its boundaries, your thoughts can scatter. They do not have to form into straight roads. They can bend, fade, fall silent, loop back. Tonight, in this story, you are freed by trees more efficiently than any door locked shut behind you. Because here, forgetfulness is medicine. You need not solve or structure. You need not prove or plan. You can drift among shadows until your body takes the hint and prepares for its true reprieve. Rest. And now, lift your eyes again toward openings between branches. Beyond the canopy waits sky wider than the forest, scattered with waiting stars. The grounded earth holds you now, but soon your eyes will leave the trunks and look into eternity again. From these trees you'll rise back to that infinite curtain of lights, a second cradle overhead. The wandering path will resolve not in goals but in stillness beneath constellations. And with each blink longer than the last, the forest will merge into sky and the sky into sleep. So step slowly. Let each breath slip louder than your footsteps. Allow the trees to carry unspoken watch while your mind trades burden for drifting. Trust this nighttime wood to hold the weight you set down. For soon it will fade upward into stars, where you will lie beneath constellations without worry, until sleep itself pulls the curtain closed. 10. Stars, memory, and the sweetness of now. Look up. The stars you see tonight will burn on long after your name is gone. They were here before the first words spilled out of human mouths, and they will still shine when the last of your bones are dust. That's both humbling and strange comfort. You stand under a sky so old, so indifferent, that it doesn't blink when whole civilizations rise and collapse. To you, it looks full, glittering. To the stars, your presence is no weight at all. They carry on in silence, cold and luminous. And here you are, small, temporary, staring at them like millions have before. Mortality sits heavy when you frame it that way. Life is a short loan. Memory fades faster than you expect. Whole stories vanish with the last person who held them. What you do in the span of a day, maybe a year, maybe a lifetime, will thin out, break apart, scatter like ash. Harsh to consider that no one holds your story forever, that fame eventually rusts into anonymity, that your name will be spoken and then stopped. Even families, with years of photographs or traditions, lose details over time. That is just how memory works. Fragile, brief, slipping through fingers the more tightly you squeeze. At first, that feels brutal, like being told your life is etched in fog that the morning sun will burn away. But before despair grows, pause. This impermanence isn't always grief. It's also perspective. The very fact that nothing lasts is what charges each moment with weight. Stars stay unchanged for eons. They repeat. But you have minutes, hours, days. You expire. And because you expire, the present is sharper. Think of breath fogging against cold glass. It vanishes too quickly to waste. That vapor is exactly how you exist. Visible for a blink, then gone, which means the noticing is everything. Let's slide sideways to the ordinary. Petting a cat while it leans into your hand, asking nothing except that you continue. Sitting with air in your lungs under open sky, not racing anywhere, not required to talk, just feeling ribs pushed gently against shirt fabric. A basic meal with someone dear, chewing slowly, laughing at something trivial enough to forget by morning. These are not achievements or legacies. They're present tense sweetness, and they are precious because they do not last. You wouldn't value them if they went on endlessly. You prize them because they don't. Because even as you hold them, you know they're fragile and slipping. Ancient people tilted their heads back to the same stars and did what humans always do, told stories. They sketched lines between random dots and invented hunters, animals, gods, myths. Constellations became a kind of comfort, a net flung across an intimidating blankness. Under those stories, travelers could feel less alone. Villagers could think of order, of shape. Though they didn't know the physics behind stars, they knew the questions pressed heavy, and narrative soothed that weight. The sky wasn't a void, it was a stage filled with characters. Whispered stories helped people face the unknown overhead and the brevity of their own lives. That history matters, because it shows how desperate people are for connection. Even staring into cosmic indifference, they pinned stories to give shape. The stars didn't change, but meaning rotated across them, different cultures, different myths, shifting tales. The anchor wasn't permanent, but it worked in the moment. Those stories gave temporary comfort. That's the point. Meaning doesn't need to be eternal to matter tonight. It can dissolve tomorrow and still feel sweet now. Like firelight, you don't demand it burn forever to be grateful for warmth. You hold your hands out while it flickers, and that's enough. So yes, memory fades. The stories you tell, the identity you nurse, the very details you consider core to who you are, they slip. Impermanence can sound cruel, but in fact, it rescues you. Because if nothing holds forever, you are free from trying to preserve yourself in marble. All that's left is to enjoy the clay as clay, still wet, still mutable, still soft in the hands. What grows from this? Relief. You don't need to drag around the heavy coffin of permanence. You only need to watch the moment in front of you sparkle for what it is. Nothing reveals this better than how quickly the ordinary disappears. Think of the laugh you had last week. Do you remember its exact sound? Probably not. The warmth it left that faded quick. And yet, for its span, it lit you up. That was its purpose. Not to last. Just to show you life could be kind. That's what impermanence teaches. Good things are not less beautiful because they vanish quickly. They are more beautiful. They flash, they glow, they leave. They prove their value by being unrepeatable. It's tempting to rage against that. To freeze time, to archive everything, to record every moment until your storage fills. But the truth is, you won't watch half of it back. Digital memory is no sturdier than human recall. Both crumble, both distort. And perhaps that's a mercy. Because obsession with keeping everything blocks you from living any of it. The attempt to preserve dulls the experience. To taste the present, you must let it vanish. The brevity is its fuel. Think of it another way. Dessert tastes sweet, not because it sustains you forever, but because it punctuates. Its charm depends on its shortness. If you ate cake non-stop, sweetness would rot into blandness. The same applies to the rest of life. A fleeting smile, a fleeting song, a fleeting embrace, they are vivid because they do not carry permanence. Their very insignificance, their fluting fragility, as the source put it, is the core of their beauty. So how does this shift your night? It lowers the stakes. It tells you that you don't need to store your story in granite to have lived. The pressure to matter forever can soften, because you were never going to anyway. And in that release, you notice details you've been trampling past. The feel of fabric against skin, the sound of your own breath measured in stillness, the simple pulse inside your temple reminding you you're here, present, alive, temporary. And temporary is enough. The stars above burn the same, regardless of what you do or don't achieve. They won't record your business dealings or measure your sleep schedule, but they still glow down as they always have, indifferent yet magnificent. That is the trick. You don't need memory to last for the universe to remain miraculous. You don't need permanence for joy to pierce. The joy erupts because it vanishes. Don't wait for the archive to validate you. Let the small things count while they happen. And so, the payoff, meaning dissolves into fragile joys, into the now, into that small satisfaction of tea warming your hands, that soft laugh that doesn't echo in eternity but is still yours tonight, into walking outside and feeling air colder than your skin, noticing your body instinctively clutch heat in response. Ordinary, fleeting, gone within hours. Yet here's the fact: they're already enough. They don't add up to an epic, but they don't need to. If impermanence rules, then every sweet note is perfect in its own brevity. The weight of holding your life eternally preserved falls away. You do not need to keep your name in the sky. You do not need to arrange your days so they echo into centuries. That burden is fantasy. This recognition that no archive is required releases your shoulders, which is exactly what allows rest to come. Fatigue feeds on demand. When demand shrinks, fatigue fades, and without the pressure of lasting meaning, your eyes grow heavier, your body more willing to surrender. Think of it now, as you look at the ceiling, or maybe imagine that forest fading into open sky. Stars burn, stories fade, memory dissolves, and that is fine, because the sweetness of now is untouched. The laugh you had, the hand you held, the kindness you made, they existed. That was their point. Not to preserve forever, but to shine briefly. And you too shine, even in soft, brief ways. When morning erases tonight, it doesn't erase that you were alive for it. That truth was always enough. So let that thought carry you further. Rest does not rely on tomorrow's value, or on some eternal memory that proves you mattered. Rest is allowed because you exist, right here, right now, with breath moving in your lungs. That existence is fragile, that existence is temporary, but as with the stars overhead, none of that makes it less astonishing. And now, with stars still above, memory already fading, and present sweetness spilling out of the smallest details, you are ready to sink toward quiet affirmations, toward peace, toward stillness, to let go of the need for permanence, and accept the brief miracle that is simply being here just for tonight. 11. Closing. Peace in nothingness. Nothing in the universe requires urgency. The stars don't press you for answers, the ocean doesn't demand progress, and silence never asks for proof. Yet the pieces of meaning you notice, laughter, warmth, little joys, can still feel alive. They're brief, but that's their charm. So let it be simple tonight. If you liked this deep dive, like and subscribe for more nights like this. Rest knowing you have nothing to prove. Repeat softly. It is okay to let go. It is okay to rest. Nothing matters, and that's okay. Breathe. Close your eyes. Sleep is already permitted.